Hello one and all, my name is John Clare, this is John's Dark Art, and as always you are very welcome. Now, the piece I want to talk about today, or rather pieces I want to talk about today, are these two here. This is Frenrir 1 and this is Frenrir 2. Now you might be thinking to yourself, why is John showing two pieces in this video? Well, the reason being, this one is an iteration on this one because I felt I could, once I'd completed this one here, wasn't exactly happy with it. There were issues that I could see that I knew if I did it again I would do better, so I did it again. Now what we'll do now is, if we go into the walkthrough, I'll show you what I did, how I did it, why I did it, and yeah, we can do that now. So let's do that now. Okay, so here we are. This is Procreate now, and what I'll do is I'll show you the first of the two images. This is Frenrir 1, or if you like, Frenrir Blue. It's not very good. It just isn't. I'm not happy with the stance, I'm not happy with the pose, I'm not happy with the body, I'm not happy with my use of colour. To be honest with you, the only singular positive I could probably give it is the head is okay. The eyes and what I did with them in terms of the heat emanating from them looks kind of interesting, I suppose. Other than that, this isn't my strongest work at all. I'd quite happily say this is probably one of my worst in the last few years, if I'm being honest with myself. And you may be thinking to yourself, well John, why would you show this? This is supposed to be you showing the best of yourself. No, it isn't. It's about the artistic process. And sometimes when it comes to the artistic process, if you're not happy with the end result of what you've just completed, then sometimes you need to do it again, which is what I did here. Now this is Frenrir 2, or if you like, Frenrir White. I'm happier with this one. Still not happy, because I'm never ever entirely happy with anything I do. I'm an artist, you know, and it's frequently commented by most artists that we are often our hardest critics. But there are things I'm happy with this one. I feel that the stance is a little bit more dynamic. The face is a lot more expressive. You know, because the story for Frenrir is that he was tricked by the gods to be bound underneath Asgard, so he didn't take part in Ragnarok, because Odin had foreseen that Frenrir was going to kill him at Ragnarok. So if Frenrir was tied up underneath the halls of Asgard, he couldn't kill Odin at Ragnarok. I mean, spoiler alert, he still does. But what I find interesting about the dichotomy between these two drawings is that while I could probably do a third version of this and do a better version, because iteration often bears improvement, and I'm not really someone who often iterates. You saw it last week with Nevermore. I did a separate iteration so I could talk about it with you, but I also felt that I could do a different variation that still holds up against the original. With this one, is because I wasn't happy with the original, I iterated on it again so I could do it better. So what we'll do, I'm going to first go into Frenrir Blue, and I'm going to go into, as I normally do, canvas information. Now the canvas information on this, if we go into statistics, this took me 13 hours and 41 minutes, 6,844 strokes on that one. And what we'll do, if we hop back out again, let's go into Frenrir White and do the same again. Canvas information, statistics. This took 15 hours and 18 minutes with 6,090 strokes. So without adding any colour, this took me longer, because it was more of a process. Because sometimes working from references, you've got a reference in front of you and you can just iterate on that reference in your artwork, whether it be through tracing or just straight up copying. And I'd be remiss to say that I don't do that, because I do. I use a lot of references in my work. But with these, I wanted them to be more like original pieces. So I used references, but I used several different references so I could get the body right, the head right, the expression right. So what we'll do first off, let's go into Frenrir Blue and let's go into the time-lapse replay. Okay, so Here we are. Now straight away you can tell that the initial drawing is very different, and I'm very much wrestling with it up to this point, because I feel like if I was criticising myself, I didn't have a clear idea exactly what it is that I wanted to do, because unlike some artists, I don't do pre-sketches. I don't tend to iterate in sketch form beforehand. Now maybe that's an issue with me as the artist, maybe an issue with my process. I do have a lot of bad habits. I'll bear that in mind. You don't want to necessarily copy everything that I do. I would not necessarily advocate for that. But I'd say up until this point here with the face, I'm fairly happy with that. In terms of it being a decent enough drawing of a dog's head or a wolf's head, but the problem with it is it's very flat looking. It's very there's no expression there. There's no emotion there. It's just basically a very blank looking stare from a very bored looking dog that I am drawing. In terms of the actual body itself, I mean, look at that paw. That paw looks stupid. It looks ridiculous. The actual fingers on the paw, they don't look right at all. It's weird as well because I mean the way it looks, it's almost as if it's standing in plantigrade rather than digitigrade. Now what I mean by that is a bear will take, if you look at a bear's paw, it walks pretty much like that. So yeah, its entire hand is bearing the weight of its body. Whereas dogs and cats tend to walk more like their heel is raised off the ground. They only walk on the balls of their feet, on their toes. And the way I've done it here is, it almost looks like, even though I've drawn it in digitigrade, it still looks like it's in plantigrade. It doesn't look right. And the rear leg there, I mean, I don't know what I'm doing here. This looks really ridiculous. You know, it's like I'd forgotten how to draw dogs' bodies, you know. And I think maybe to a degree, maybe where my headspace was at the time wasn't quite right, and that affected the execution of the work. Because this looks like a 12-year-old did it. It's not very good. I'm not happy with it. Spoiler alert: I'm not going to be putting this up for sale on the website at all. No, I'm not happy with it. I don't think it's good enough. Now, if we go into Frenrir White, now with this one, if we go back into our time maps replay, now it's started. So I started. If you look here, it's almost like I'm starting from a very, very similar position that I did with Frenrir Blue, and I'm falling into the same problems. But now what I've done here is I've moved the paw to one side. Now just by doing that, moving that paw over and across, what that's done is straight away it's created a little bit more dynamism. The head's a lot lower, so it looks like you're viewing Frenrir from below rather than straight on. Again, by messing with perspective slightly, it gives it a little bit more dynamism. Now also, and the rear leg that I was not happy with in the first one, now this looks proper. This looks like a rear dog's leg, because again, because they're digitigrade, its toes are on the floor, its heels up in the air. So it looks more low. Frenrir looks lower to the ground. He looks more dynamic. You know, he looks a lot more intimidating. And then I start working on the face. Now, initially the head's too small. So what do? By messing with perspective and increasing the size of the head, it adds a lot more dynamism, a lot more drama. So by doing that, now I moved it down, and initially I was going to put a lot more in terms of chains holding the animal down, which I ended up scrapping later on. But another thing I also did was I kept the eyes white. Now you may if you've watched a few of these videos before, you'll know that it's something that I like to do with some of my animals. I like to kind of keep the eyes white, or I like to make them look like glass, like onyx. Either or, because it creates a slight feeling of the supernatural, something slightly unnerving about it. Now, something I'm probably not happy with, I still don't think I've got the feet quite right. You know, there's things I could do to make that look a lot better, I feel. And in so doing, I think, while there is the drama, I think in terms of the actual body, in terms of the way it looks, the way he's standing, the perspective of it, I think it's a much better drawing in the end. Now, is it perfect? No, it isn't. I kind of copped out a little bit, because if you see here, I put like a white choker on him there, and I've tied it also down with two white bindings around his ankles, and then they're tied into the floor. Now, I could have been a bit more adventurous and a bit braver with it by tying down more of him to make him look like he's like pulling up from the trains, because that's more accurate to the myth. Because the way Frenrir was tricked was that the gods turned around to him and said, "Hey, Frenrir, you're big, you're strong. I bet you can break these bindings." And he keeps breaking these chains, and he keeps breaking these chains until Brock and Sindri, who you may know from the God of War series, but Brock and Sindri create a chain that's made of like cat's footsteps and the hair of a baby or some silly magical artifacts. Anyway, they make this chain, and that's very small. It's very thin, very light, but it binds Fenrir down. It traps him underneath Asgard until Ragnarok. I think this is an interesting thing to talk about. I mean, before we go into like rounding out and me kind of pontificating at the end, I think what this shows me as the artist, and hopefully shows you, gives you some kind of insight into my thought process. But sometimes, like, not all your pieces are going to work out. Let's be honest. Some of them are going to suck, you know? And I'm fairly open about it. I think Fenrir Blue sucks. It's not very good. And I always feel I could do better. That kind of drive to do better is what made me iterate on it. And I think the second one is an improvement. And if I were to do a third version of this, it would be better again. Now, there's different ways you can iterate, which we'll go into now in a minute. But I feel that sometimes iteration can lead to improvement, and it can lead to you creating better work in the long run. But let's hold that thought for a second and let's round this out. So let's do that now, shall we? Okay, so that was Frenrir Blue and Frenrir White. And if I'm being honest, I don't think either of these are going to be good enough to put up for sale on the website. But there are other artworks that are up on the website that I do feel are good enough, which is, in case you don't know, www.johnstarkart.com. So if you'd like to go over there, pick yourself up a print, help support what we're trying to do with this channel, and yeah, www.johnstarkart.com. Thank you very much. So, in terms of Fenrir White and Fenrir Blue, and this whole thing about iteration. Now, as I said in the prior section, I'm not really one of these people who tends to do lots of different variations and versions of artwork before I go ahead and do it. I tend to have an idea in my head, and then I try to get as near to my idea in my head as possible. Now, is that the ideal way of working? Probably not. It's just how I've learned how to do it over the years. I mean, I have bad habits. Sometimes I'll just draw straight from reference, like I did with, say, As Yet Untitled, the bear drawing I did a few weeks ago. That was more or less a straight, I wouldn't say copy of the reference, but variation on the reference, if that makes any sense. Sometimes it'll be more like Eating Crow that I showed a little while ago. This drawing here, I used several different references, but I had an idea in my head of a skull with its mouth open and these crows flying out of it, you know, with, funnily enough, another Norse mythology reference, my self-portrait of Odin in a flat cap still I feel is one of my best works. With this one here, three different references. One I iterated upon, that raven there, I kind of gave him an extra wing, I opened his mouth, made it a bit more dynamic. But yeah, like, it's not as if it's how I like to work, you know. I like using references. I like to try and make my drawings look as good as I possibly can. Do I always succeed? No, of course I don't. And sometimes iteration is necessary. Like, if you look at a lot of other artists, especially guys who do like character artwork, you know, I'm fascinated by that. If you look, say for instance, a great example would be something like fighting game characters. Street Fighter 6 has just come out, one of my favourite gaming series of all time. I've been playing it since on and off since about 1992, when Street Fighter 2 first came out in the arcades. If you look at the character design process and the artwork that goes into designing those characters, there's like millions of variations and iterations before they settle on a final design. And I think that's really cool, because it's a really great way of working through problems. It's a great way of developing an idea to the point where you're happy with the final execution. I don't necessarily think there's any one way to do artwork. It's dependent very much on the type of art that you're trying to produce. If it's more commercial art, then yes, that you're going to find yourself in a position where you're going to need to do iterations, especially if you're working for clients. This is why I don't do commissions, because there'll always be an issue, there'll always be a problem, there'll always be something that the client is not happy with that you've got to go back and adjust and alter. And it's a source of great frustration for a lot of artists. But if you're working in the commercial sector, then you're going to find yourself doing that. That's just the nature of the beast. That uncomfortable dissonance between money and creativity, you know. But with me, I think what I want to try and do is I want to try and communicate something. And again, like I always say, whether I'm successful or not is really down to you. Also, when it comes to art, you're always going to extrapolate something from an artwork that the artist doesn't necessarily always intend to communicate. You know, some people have turned around to me. I mean, the idea behind the name John's Dark Art, for instance, is someone came up to me once and said, "I like your work, John, but it's too dark for me." And I just thought, all right then, why not lean into it? So I did. But in terms of like the way I like to work, in terms of the way I like to, what my sources for inspiration, which are usually a lot of my sources for inspiration are just literature, Norse mythology, or funny sayings like eating crow, murder of crows, poems like Nevermore, or symbolism in general. Like, you know, if you go into a lot of Irish myths, there is my fascination on corvids in general. If you go to Irish myths of the Morrigan, Hugin and Munin in Norse mythology, Apollo's raven in Greek mythology, how he turned all crows black because, you know, they annoyed him. I find it fascinating that no matter where you go in the world, these black birds, these black carrion birds, they have a very kind of strong mythological sentiment behind them, irrespective of their cultures. Wherever they're found, there'll be some kind of story, there'll be some kind of mythology built up behind these animals, which I think is fascinating. Also, you know, I draw a lot of skulls because, you know, death. And, you know, it may seem a bit facetious, but it's something that I think about. You know, I'm middle-aged these days, you know, so I think about, what do I want to leave behind? What do I want to contribute? And it's something that, you know, I would say keeps me up on the odd occasion. It's why I'm doing what I'm doing now. It's, you know, whether it's Twitch streaming, whether it's YouTube. I mean, it's not necessarily, oh, everyone look at me, how brilliant am I? It's, no, what can I contribute? What can I give to the world? And it's not just my drawings or my art or whatever else, but what else can I contribute? Is there information that I can impart? Is there useful tips that I can give, or useful information of any kind? You know, I don't know. I just think that it's something that I think about quite a lot. It's something that I'm trying to do here, you know. And the funny thing is, getting back to iteration, is that I still feel right now, in terms of our YouTube progress, I still think that we're very much newbies at this, you know. And I think we're going to improve. Hopefully I will improve as a presenter. Hopefully I will improve in terms of talking to the camera, which is something I still don't feel very comfortable with. Hopefully our podcasts will get better. I mean, if you watch post-mortem, you'll see that, you know, there's been an increase in the production quality of those. You know, it's about trying to get better and better and better. So another thing is, I suppose, like iteration learning. You learn through iteration. You learn through improvement. You know, you learn by doing, and by doing, and by doing, and by doing. I mean, the reason why I feel I'm pretty good at drawing. I feel I'm a pretty good artist. And I feel the reason why I feel like that is because I've been doing it a long time. I've been drawing a long time, and I've been iterating for a long time. To the point where now I feel 9 times out of 10, if I have an idea in my head, I can execute upon it. And that just comes with time. The more you iterate, the more you improve. The more you improve, the better you'll get. And hopefully you'll get to a point where you're producing work of your own that you feel is a high enough standard that you share it with the world in whatever way you see fit. Anyway, my name's been John Clare. This has been John's Dark Art, and as always, you are very welcome. Until next time.